The morning sun glittered on the glass towers of Crestview Academy, where wealth and privilege danced like shadows behind gold-rimmed walls. Beneath the ivy-draped balconies and marble fountains, laughter echoed from polished hallways filled with the children of tycoons, celebrities, and world leaders. But far from the penthouse classrooms and chauffeur-lined driveways, in the quiet creak of the maintenance wing, a different rhythm beat, one made of sweeping brooms, mop buckets, and quiet dreams. Isla Ramirez never minded being invisible. The daughter of the Academy's janitor, she spent her free hours reading novels behind the gym bleachers or sketching designs in a worn notebook while her father polished the linoleum. Unlike the other students, she wore a second-hand uniform and carried no designer backpack, only a leather-bound book her father gave her, full of ideas and endless possibility. Then came that Friday. The annual spring gala was in full swing, a sparkling affair by the school's private lake. Crystal chandeliers hung from white tents, a string quartet played under a willow tree, and a row of luxury yachts bobbed on the shimmering water. Among them was the son of real estate mogul Lawrence Castor, Xander Castor, who was as untouchable as he was admired. With his sculpted charm and arrogant swagger, he ruled the academy with a smirk and a wink. Isla watched from a distance, leaning against the boathouse as her father repaired a broken docklight. She had no business being at the gala, but no one noticed a janitor's daughter standing at the edge of their world. Then came the scream. It wasn't the elegant trill of a startled debutante or the startled gasp of spilled champagne. It was sharp, primal, and real. Xander fell. He fell off the boat. Someone shrieked. The music stopped. A crowd rushed to the lake's edge. Panic rippled like fire through silk. And there, thrashing in the deep, dark water, was Xander Castor, his hands flailing, mouth gasping, eyes wide with terror. No one moved. They stood frozen, his so-called friends, the staff, even a lifeguard paralyzed by disbelief. No one wanted to ruin their tailored suits or gowns. No one wanted to dive into the cold, silty water. Except Isla. Without a word, she dropped her sketchbook, kicked off her shoes, and sprinted down the dock. She dove in, slicing through the water with startling precision. Her arms cut through the current, each stroke powered by years of swimming in community pools and city rec centers, while others took private lessons in heated spas. Xander was sinking. She reached him just as his head vanished below the surface. His hands clutched at her weakly, pulling them both under. The weight of him, his panic, was like an anchor. But Isla kicked harder, gritted her teeth, and wrapped her arm around his chest. She rose with him, coughing, gasping. The crowd broke into gasps and stunned silence as she dragged him to the shallows. A pair of teachers finally rushed forward to help lift him from the water. Xander vomited lake water, then blinked, dazed and blinking toward the girl who had pulled him from the edge of death. No one clapped. No one cheered. They simply stared at her, soaked, breathless, shivering in a soaked uniform 3 sizes too big. The silence was worse than the cold. Then the headmaster stepped forward, straightening his tie. "Miss Ramirez, is it?" he said, eyes flicking to the maintenance tag still pinned to her chest. "You saved a life today. That won't be forgotten." But Isla wasn't looking at him. Her eyes were locked on Xander's. His lips parted like he wanted to speak, but no words came. The next day, everything changed. Or rather, everything should have. Isla returned to school expecting. What, exactly? A thank you. A moment of recognition? Instead, there were whispers. Some students snickered. A few whispered, publicity stunt, or she probably pushed him in. The glittering world of Crestview didn't like debts it couldn't repay with money. And Isla, brave, brilliant Isla, had broken the rules. She had made herself visible. Xander didn't speak to her. Not the next day, not the one after. He didn't thank her. He didn't even look in her direction. Until the fire. It started in the chemistry lab 2 weeks later. An accident, a faulty fuse, no one knew. But in the chaos of evacuation, Isla found herself trapped on the 2nd floor. Smoke filled the halls. Heat licked the walls. She covered her mouth and searched for a way out, the screams below muffled by roaring flames. And then, a crash. The door burst open. Xander. Face streaked with soot, jacket tied around his mouth, he shouted her name. Isla. Come on. She stared at him in disbelief. What are you doing here? He grabbed her hand. Returning the favor. They ran. Through smoke and flame, down a collapsing stairwell, out into the open air. The crowd outside erupted, this time in cheers, sirens, shouting. But in that moment, none of it mattered. They stood on the lawn, breathless, clutching each other like lifelines. And then, finally, Xander spoke. You saved my life. Twice, actually. Once from drowning. And once from who I was before you jumped in after me. Isla raised an eyebrow. You mean the guy who ignored me for 2 weeks? I mean the guy who didn't know how to say thank you until now. He looked down. I was scared. Not of the water. Of owing something real to someone I couldn't repay. You don't owe me, Isla said softly. But you could start by not pretending I don't exist. He smiled, awkward and unsure. Deal. But Isla wasn't looking for deals. She was looking for change. And for the first time, maybe, so was he. Because in a school built on wealth, privilege and polish, the richest moment wasn't in the gala, the gowns or the lake. It was in a girl who dove into the dark without hesitation, and a boy who, perhaps for the first time, wanted to follow her into the light. And just when they thought the echoes of the fire would fade, a secret began to emerge. One hidden behind the blueprints of Crestview's old foundation. A secret that someone would kill to protect. That he began with a sound, a soft metallic clink, coming from deep beneath the west wing, where Isla's father had been assigned to clear out an old storage vault sealed for decades. The building's oldest wing, built in the 1800s, had long since been repurposed and forgotten, swallowed by renovations. Few students ever passed through its creaking corridors. But after the fire, safety inspections had turned up structural concerns, and janitorial crews were ordered in. Isla accompanied her father late one evening, sketchpad tucked under her arm, expecting nothing more than dust and silence. What they found instead was a steel hatch under a rotted floorboard, rusted shut but not locked. Probably an old coal chute, her father muttered, tapping it with a wrench. Or maybe some old maintenance tunnel. Isla knelt beside it. This wasn't on the blueprints you showed me last week. He looked uneasy. Things get buried. Forgotten. Let's just report it and move on. This isn't something we should mess with. But Isla was already peering into the shadows between the bolts. The edges were lined with strange engravings, not quite Latin, not quite mathematical. She reached out, traced a finger across one of the grooves, and something in the back of her mind flickered. Not recognition. Something older. That night, long after her father had gone to sleep, she couldn't get the hatch out of her mind. Her dreams were filled with water again, not the lake, but something deeper. Submerged hallways. Whispering stone. Eyes in the dark. She returned 2 days later, alone. She didn't know why. Something had begun to shift since the fire, like the air around her had changed. People started noticing her. Not just teachers and students, but strangers. People who shouldn't have known her name. Men in suits watching from parked cars outside the school. A woman in sunglasses who followed her to the library and disappeared between the stacks. And Xander had started acting differently, too. Not just polite. Attentive. Curious. Protective, even. They'd started talking more, walking together after class, sharing notes in economics. He had asked her once why she always looked like she was listening to something no one else could hear. Because I am, she said. When she told him about the hatch, he didn't laugh or dismiss her. He said, "Show me." So they went back together. It took a crowbar and half an hour of work, but they got the hatch open. A cloud of dust billowed out, thick and ancient. A narrow spiral staircase descended into blackness, each step metal and cold. The air smelled of oil, damp stone, And something else, something faintly floral and sickly sweet. They brought flashlights. The tunnel below was far older than anything in Crestview. The walls were stone, lined with iron pipes that pulsed faintly with warmth. As they moved deeper, they saw markings, symbols carved into the walls, some glowing faintly in ultraviolet light. Isla brushed one and felt a sudden jolt of memory. A door slamming. A scream. A voice whispering her name, not her name now, but something ancient and echoing. They reached a chamber at the base of the stairwell. Circular. Domed. In the center was a pedestal with a worn leather-bound journal resting on top. Xander reached for it. "Wait," Isla said, but it was too late. His fingers brushed the cover, and the room pulsed. A gust of wind burst upward from the floor, extinguishing their lights for an instant. The walls shimmered, and for a heartbeat, Isla wasn't standing underground at all. She was standing in a library of infinite shelves, surrounded by the rustle of pages and ink dripping from the ceiling like rain. Then it was gone. Xander staggered backward. What was that? Isla picked up the journal and opened it. The pages were filled with diagrams. Maps of Crestview, yes, but also tunnels, sealed chambers, and something marked the Vault of Inheritance. Dates filled the margins. Some were centuries old. Others had timestamps from just last week. They left the chamber and sealed the hatch again, but nothing could unseal what had been set in motion. That night, her dorm room was searched. They had hidden the journal in a locked metal box under Isla's bed, but when she returned from the library, the window was open and the mattress had been cut open. Xander was furious. "We have to report this. Someone's trying to steal it." But Isla shook her head. "No. Someone already owns it. We just woke it up." She started researching. Between classes and janitorial shifts, she dug into the academy's history. Crestview had been founded on an old estate, donated, the record said, by an anonymous benefactor in 1893. But there were letters in the city archives that spoke of something older on the land. An order of architects and scholars who built the school over the gate. A gate to what? No one said. She followed every lead, every rumor. There were faculty members who had retired under mysterious circumstances, students who'd vanished mid-semester, and a secret fraternity known only as the 13th Bell. "Sounds like a bad movie," Xander had said, but his voice lacked conviction. Then he found something in his father's private study, a ledger, hidden behind a false panel in a bookshelf. It listed payments to Project Lamina, dated back decades. The names of donors read like a who's who of Crestview's most powerful alumni. His father's name was on nearly every page. One entry caught Isla's eye: test subject, Group B, terminated. Vault access denied. Xander stared at the phrase for a long time. "What does that mean?" "Terminated," Isla whispered. "They've been doing experiments on students." The deeper they dug, the more the academy unraveled. Teachers who weren't really teachers. Surveillance systems wired into the dorms. Records that vanished after being requested. And then there were the dreams. Isla began waking in the middle of the night with markings on her skin, symbols drawn in ink that faded within hours. Her sketchpad would be filled with images she didn't remember drawing. Labyrinths, clockwork mechanisms, faces that weren't quite human. One night, she found a letter slipped under her door. "You opened the hatch. You broke the seal. Now they're coming." There was no signature. No return address. She showed it to Xander. He read it, then burned it without a word. The next morning, a new student arrived at Crestview. His name was Julian Vale. Tall. Too polished. Too confident for someone who had supposedly just transferred from abroad. His eyes lingered too long on Isla in the cafeteria. And when he passed her in the hallway, he muttered, "You should have stayed above." That night, Xander tailed him. Julian led him into the east courtyard after curfew, slipped into a locked greenhouse, and opened a trapdoor beneath a flower bed. Xander followed and saw something impossible. A staircase that spiraled downward, far deeper than the building's foundation should allow. He turned to report it to Isla, but when he emerged, 2 men in black coats were waiting. They said nothing, just stared at him with blank eyes. One reached for something under his coat. Xander ran. He didn't stop until he reached Isla's room, breathless and pale. They know about us. They're watching. We need to leave. Now. But Isla shook her head. We're past that. If we leave, it follows us. This place, it's a lock. And we're holding the key. He hesitated. Then we open it together. They began decoding the journal. The symbols corresponded to locations around campus, 7 markers, placed in precise alignment. When they overlaid the diagrams with satellite imagery, it formed a perfect 7-pointed star. At the center was the old bell tower, condemned years ago after an earthquake left it structurally unsound. But the journal called it something else, the Eye. The final entry read, "When the eye is opened, the vault will awaken. Only the bearer of the mark may pass. All others will be lost." That night, they went to the bell tower. It was draped in chains and condemned signs, but the chains had been broken recently. Inside, the air felt thick with pressure, like the building itself was holding its breath. Each step up the spiral staircase creaked like a warning. At the top, a brass plate rested where the bell should have been. It was etched with the same symbol Isla had seen on her wrist in her dreams. She reached out. The moment her fingers touched the plate, her skin shimmered. The mark reappeared, glowing, alive. The plate shifted, and the floor beneath them groaned. Then it began to turn. Not fall. Turn. Like a wheel rotating a lock. A low hum filled the air. The stone walls pulsed. The 7 points on the campus map lit up, one by one, like lanterns flickering to life. Isla turned to Xander, eyes wide. "We didn't open a door." He swallowed. "We woke something." Below them, deep in the earth, a heartbeat echoed. And for the first time since she'd saved him from drowning, Xander didn't look afraid. He looked ready. The tower shuddered as the humming deepened into a slow, rhythmic throb, like the ancient heart of the academy was beating for the first time in centuries. Dust fell in fine sheets from the rafters, curling through the narrow slats of moonlight that crept through the broken glass of the belfry. Xander stepped closer to Isla, but she hardly noticed. Her hand was still on the plate, glowing with the faint luminescence of the mark on her wrist, now fully awakened. A series of mechanical clicks echoed from beneath their feet, intricate gears, locks, tumblers, shifting within the stone like the bones of a living creature rearranging themselves. The rotation of the floor slowed to a stop, settling with a final clang. Then silence. Xander exhaled slowly, glancing around. "What now?" Isla didn't speak. Her eyes were drawn to a slit of light now visible behind a thick wooden beam near the far edge of the tower. She moved toward it, pushing aside centuries of dust-coated debris. What she uncovered made Xander suck in a breath. A door. Carved from ironwood, inscribed with symbols similar to the journal, it looked impossibly old, older than the tower itself. As if the tower had been built around it. There was no handle. But there was an indentation. A palm-sized hollow, marked by the same glowing sigil that had appeared on Isla's skin. "I think it wants your hand," Xander murmured. "I think it wants more than that," she whispered. Still, she pressed her hand into the hollow. The moment she did, the sigil flared with brilliant white light. The tower pulsed, a low frequency vibrating in their bones. The door receded an inch, then split down the center and opened inward with a hiss of escaping air. Beyond was a staircase, descending into complete darkness. The air was warmer, damp, and tinged with something metallic. Xander reached for his flashlight, but when he turned it on, the light flickered and died. He smacked it. Nothing. Isla's phone, too, was dead. The light from the sigil on her wrist was the only thing guiding them. "Guess we follow the pulse," Xander muttered. They descended slowly, the spiral winding tighter the deeper they went. The stone walls were wet to the touch, covered in thin veins of glowing blue crystal. The hum grew louder, rhythmic now, like chanting just below the threshold of comprehension. The stairs ended in a vast chamber, circular and domed like the one under the west wing, but far larger. It pulsed with blue light from 7 massive pillars surrounding a central basin. The basin was filled with a thick, luminous liquid, shifting and swirling with hypnotic grace. Around the chamber's walls were statues, hooded figures holding staffs, their eyes covered by metal bands. Each one had a different symbol carved into its chest. "It's a temple," Isla said softly. "To what?" "I don't think it's a what. I think it's a who." The air buzzed with electricity. A whisper rose around them, not from any single direction, but from every corner of the chamber. The language was alien, but Isla somehow understood it. "Blood of the gatekeeper. You return." She turned, but there was no one there. Xander looked shaken. "I heard it too. What did it mean?" She stepped toward the basin. As she did, the glowing liquid rippled and formed shapes, images, faces, buildings, fire. Then a sigil matching her mark, followed by her own face. "Isla," Xander said slowly, "why does it know you?" "I think I've been here before," she said. "But how?" She didn't have an answer. Then the whispering returned, louder now. "The blood remembers. The vault recognizes its own. Speak the word, and the gate shall reveal." "Speak what word?" Xander asked. Isla didn't know, but her lips moved anyway. The word came unbidden, from somewhere buried beneath logic and memory. "Solvon." The room went silent. The liquid in the basin flared, blinding white, then exploded upward in a column of light. The stone beneath them shifted again, grinding open into a spiral of descending steps that sank into a void below. Xander grabbed Isla's hand. "We don't have to go. Not yet." "We have to," she said. "We're not just unlocking secrets. We're undoing something. Something buried." They descended. The next chamber was colder. The air thinner. The walls here were made of a strange, obsidian-like stone that shimmered faintly. Etched into the floor was a massive mural, a circle within a circle, surrounding an open eye. Around it were figures, some human, some not. One of them looked exactly like the statue from the lake courtyard. "Do you remember the legend of the 13th bell?" Xander asked. She nodded. The secret society that guarded the gate to the underworld. Everyone thought it was just a myth. "I don't think they were guarding a gate. I think they were holding it shut." A sudden creaking echoed behind them. They turned. Julian Vale. He stood at the top of the stairs, eyes glowing faintly blue. Behind him were 2 men in long coats, the same ones Xander had seen near the greenhouse. "Did you really think you were the first to find this place?" Julian said. "You're not the chosen ones. You're just the catalysts." Isla stepped forward. "What is this place?" Julian smiled. "A vault, yes, but not for gold or weapons. For memories. For bloodlines. For ancient power. Hidden here by your ancestors, Isla. Power you were never meant to awaken." Xander clenched his fists. "You're trying to steal it." "No," Julian said. "We're trying to contain it." The 2 men moved fast. Xander lunged at one, knocking him down. The other reached Isla and grabbed her wrist, trying to pull her back up the stairs, but the mark on her skin flared, and he recoiled in pain, screaming as smoke rose from his hand. Julian's face twisted. "You really don't understand what you are, do you?" "Why don't you enlighten me?" Isla snapped, backing toward the center of the chamber. Julian raised a hand, and a shimmer of energy rippled through the air. The obsidian walls glowed with the same sigils as the journal. The air thickened, like time itself had slowed. "You are the last of the gate blood," he said. "The ones who bound the eye. And if you don't reseal it, everything your ancestors locked away will rise again." Isla's voice dropped. "Then why are you trying to stop us?" "Because you're unstable. You've already broken the first seal. The more you unlock, the more it bleeds through. What bleeds through? Xander asked. Julian looked directly at Isla. The other side. Suddenly the walls convulsed. The murals began to move, the figures within them twisting, writhing. A rumble filled the air, and from the center of the chamber, the floor split open, slowly revealing a void filled with liquid shadow, shifting like sentient oil. Xander stepped back. I don't like this. Isla was staring at the void, her eyes wide. She could hear it now, not a whisper, but a call. Familiar. Intimate. A voice that sounded like her own, calling from the deep. Come back to us. You left us behind. Julian's men were retreating now. The chamber trembled. The liquid rose higher. Julian shouted over the roar. You have to seal it. You opened the first lock. Only your blood can close it again. But Isla couldn't move. Her feet were rooted to the floor. Her vision was filled with light and shadow, colliding and converging. She saw fragments, memories not her own. A war. A betrayal. A woman with her face, standing on the edge of a cliff, hands glowing with white fire. And the voice said, You sealed us in to protect them. But they never protected you. Suddenly Xander grabbed her shoulders. Isla, look at me. She blinked. The world snapped back into focus. You don't have to listen to it, he said. You're not alone in this. She took a deep breath, stepping toward the edge of the void. She raised her hand, and the mark pulsed once, then began to burn. Julian cried out, Now! Before it crosses over. But something else had already begun rising. Something with eyes. The void rippled and heaved, like the surface of a black ocean under some foreign gravitational pull. Shapes pressed against it from beneath, limbs too long, faces half-formed, shifting with an almost human desperation. One by one, pale blue eyes began opening in the darkness, unblinking, lidless, shining like stars beneath the surface. Isla could feel them looking directly at her, not with anger or hunger, but with recognition. She took a slow step back. The pain in her wrist intensified. The mark blazed now, scorching her skin like branding iron, yet she didn't scream. The symbols on the walls pulsed in sync with her heartbeat. Something in the chamber was responding, waiting, testing her. Xander kept close beside her, eyes locked on the seething shadow in the center of the room. You have to close it, Isla. Whatever this is, it's coming through unless you stop it. Julian backed toward the staircase, face pale and slick with sweat. You don't get it. This isn't a doorway, it's a vein. A passage carved into reality. It doesn't just open in this world. Once it's flowing, it won't stop at this place. Or this time. What do you mean? Xander shouted. Time. Look at the walls. Julian gestured wildly. Those murals? They aren't stories. They're records. Echoes from timelines where the vault wasn't sealed in time. You think this chamber is underground? It's beneath everything. Beneath the fabric itself. The shadows began coalescing, forming something with structure, a skeletal frame wrapped in liquid, shifting like smoke around invisible muscle. Hands with 7 fingers. A head with no face, only a ring of spinning eyes. It rose slowly from the basin like a god pulling itself from its grave. And Isla knew it. Not by memory. Not by logic. By blood. She whispered its name without knowing she knew it. Ilerith. The creature stopped moving. Every eye turned to her. Xander looked at her, confused. What did you say? She named it, Julian said in horror. She remembered. A wave of pressure burst from the void, an unseen force like wind, like gravity collapsing inward. The chamber moaned under the strain, stones cracking, sparks erupting from the sigils in the walls. Ilerith stepped fully into the space between worlds, a form of roiling shadow and light. Its body was tall enough to scrape the arching dome. The ring of eyes spun slowly, like orbiting moons, each gazing into different possibilities. It spoke. Not with sound, but through thought. Language poured straight into the mind. You called me from sleep, Gateblood. Have you come to renew the seal? Or to release the truth? Isla didn't answer. She couldn't. Her body felt like it was vibrating apart, her mind tearing at the edges. Memories not hers flooded her thoughts. Centuries of battle, sacrifice, death. Lives she hadn't lived. Names she'd never heard. A war fought in silence beneath the world, across eons. She saw a council of 13 cloaked figures, binding Alerith in a chamber made of collapsing time. She saw herself among them, her face younger, harder, eyes glowing white. She was the one who locked the gate. She was the one who took the key and buried it in her bloodline. And now it had come back to her. I didn't mean to open it, she whispered, falling to her knees. But you did open it. As you always do, Alerith replied. Xander dropped beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. You can still stop this. Whatever it is, whoever you were before, it doesn't define you. You're here now. With me. Her hand trembled as she raised it, the mark on her wrist pulsing like a heartbeat. The air thickened again. Julian shouted something, but it was swallowed in the roar of the chamber. The sigils on the walls began to burn white, one by one. She placed her hand on the obsidian floor. The mark flared, and Alerith screamed. The sound was like reality twisting. Stone cracked, and time itself seemed to falter. The past leaked in, flashes of Crestview during the construction of the original school. The founders performing ancient rites beneath the bell tower. The storm that broke the first seal. The failed sacrifices. But more than that, Isla saw her mother. Not her real mother, not the woman who raised her, but the first one. A Gateblood like herself. Alone. Fighting a war no one else believed in. A woman who had loved, lost, and burned everything to hold back the dark. And now, through generations of silence and forgetting, that legacy had returned to Isla. The pain stopped. The mark on her wrist pulsed one final time and vanished. She stood. Alerith paused, cocking its faceless head. You reject your past. No, Isla said. I complete it. She raised her hand. The chamber flared, the sigils lifting off the walls and orbiting around her like stars. Her eyes glowed now, white-hot, mirrors of those that once stared through the void. She began to chant. Not in English, not even in words, but in tones. Frequencies. The language of sealing. Alerith hissed, retreating toward the basin, but it was too late. The mural beneath their feet burst into light, the eye at its center spinning rapidly. Light erupted from the floor, engulfing the basin, the creature, the entire chamber. The force knocked Julian and his guards to the ground, sent Xander stumbling backward. But Isla stood rooted, hands raised, the energy pouring through her like a vessel. With a final, shuddering roar, the creature was pulled back into the void. The basin collapsed inward. The chamber fell silent. Dust hung in the air like fog, glowing faintly from the dying sigils. The floor was whole again. The basin was gone. No more liquid, no more voice. Just stillness. Xander approached carefully. Isla, are you? She turned, tears streaming down her face, but her eyes were clear again. It's sealed. For now. Julian groaned, dragging himself upright. His expression was unreadable, half fury, half awe. You don't understand what you've done. That thing wasn't the enemy. It was the warning. What does that mean? Xander asked sharply. Julian looked at Isla. Alerith was the first, the oldest, but not the last. The vault isn't a prison. It's a sentinel system. A failsafe. A lighthouse at the edge of the dark. You just smashed the only glass between us and what comes next. You said it would cross over, Isla said. If I didn't stop it. And it would've, Julian admitted. But at least we would have seen it. Now we're blind. And they're still coming. The walls shuddered again. Not violently, but subtly. Like a ripple. A warning. Xander swore. You're saying that was just the beginning, Julian finished. Above them, faintly, the sound of bells echoed. 13 chimes. One after another. But no bell tower had stood for 100 years. Isla looked up. Something's shifted. Something's watching. Far above, back at the surface, the 7 marked points on the campus flared once more, each flickering weakly like dying stars. Then one by one, they winked out. In darkness. In silence. In waiting. Isla stood in the center of the sealed chamber, chest rising and falling as her body fought to regulate the aftershock of the energy that had just passed through her. The sigils around her had dimmed but not vanished. They hovered faintly in the corners of the air, like embers that refused to go out. The weight of the encounter pressed down on her, a cold gravity that settled into her bones. Something was gone, yes, but something else was now awake. Watching. Waiting. Julian leaned against the wall, nursing a bloodied hand, eyes focused on the scorched spot where Alarith had stood. You heard the bells. That wasn't just a reaction to the seal. That was a signal. Xander paced nearby, fists clenched, jaw tight. So what? Now we wait for the next horror to come crawling out of the dark. You want us to just sit here and hope they don't find another way through? No, Isla said softly. Her voice echoed strangely in the chamber, touched by a resonance that hadn't been there before. We don't wait. We prepare. The words didn't feel like hers, but she meant them all the same. Julian looked up, shaking his head. You don't even know how. This wasn't meant for you. You were supposed to inherit a name, a bloodline, a burden, not lead it. Not take it into your own hands. I didn't ask for any of it, she replied. But I'm not going to run from it either. She turned toward the staircase, and without waiting, began the long climb back to the surface. Xander followed immediately. Julian hesitated, then limped after them, muttering something under his breath that Isla couldn't hear but somehow understood. A language older than language itself. Not a threat. A warning. Or maybe a curse. They emerged beneath the bell tower into a night that felt somehow wrong. The air was colder than it had any right to be in late spring. The stars overhead shimmered too brightly. And Crestview Academy stood utterly silent. Too silent. Not a single window glowed with light. Not a single owl hooted from the trees. It was as if the school itself had drawn breath and chosen not to exhale. Xander looked around uneasily. Where is everyone? Isla walked ahead, eyes scanning the windows, the trees, the rooftops. Every shadow felt stretched, pulled at strange angles. The buildings didn't look different, not exactly. But the campus didn't feel like Crestview anymore. It felt like a replica, some strange unspoken distortion of home. Julian stepped beside them, frowning. We crossed something on the way out. A threshold. Not physical, temporal. I felt it when we passed through the seal. You're saying this isn't the same world we left? Xander asked, voice sharp. Julian tilted his head, listening to the silence. I'm saying it's adjacent, close, but not quite real. Isla stopped walking. Then where are we? A whisper rippled through the air like silk tearing. Then another. They came from all directions, weaving between the buildings, riding the leaves of the windless trees. Not words. Just presence. And then, footsteps. Soft. Precise. Coming from the direction of the main hall. The 3 of them turned as a figure emerged from the shadows. A tall man in an old-fashioned black uniform, crest stitched over his heart. Not the current academy emblem, but the original one, the one from before the school was founded. His face was smooth, almost too smooth, like a wax figure brought to life. His eyes glowed faintly gold. He stopped 10 feet from them and gave a shallow bow. Gateblood, he said, voice like parchment sliding over stone. We've been expecting you. Xander stepped forward instinctively. Who the hell are you? I am the warden, the man replied unmoved. Guardian of the threshold. Watcher of the shard realms. I serve the 13th bell. Julian cursed under his breath. They survived. I thought the order dissolved when the last gate collapsed. The order was never meant to be public, the warden said. Its members sleep in time until they are summoned. And now, you have rung the bell. You have opened the eye. I sealed the eye, Isla said firmly. The warden gave a slight shake of his head. You sealed a gate. But there are many. The air around him shimmered, and with a flick of his wrist, a rippling projection opened midair. A star map. Except these weren't stars. Each point pulsed in sync with a rhythm Isla now recognized. Each one a gate, a fragment of the vault scattered across not just space, but dimensions. There were once 13, the warden said. Now there are 7. He touched one of the pulsing points. It flared, then dimmed. One just fell. That was not your doing. It was theirs. Who? Xander demanded. The warden's eyes narrowed slightly. The broken choir. The ones Alarith kept at bay for centuries. When you severed its tether, you broke the last leash. Julian turned to Isla. This is what I tried to warn you about. The vault didn't contain evil. It held back balance. And now they're loose. What do they want? She asked. Nothing, the warden said. And everything. The map shimmered again, showing burning cities, collapsed skies, oceans filled with screaming shadows. But it wasn't this world. Not yet. These are possibilities, the warden said. Branches. Futures. Your actions have split the timeline further than the 13th bell ever intended. Isla swallowed. Can they be stopped? He regarded her for a long time before answering. No. But they can be redirected. You cannot win. But you can choose who survives. She felt her knees weaken at that, but she stayed upright. What do you want me to do? The warden extended his hand, and from the folds of his coat he produced a small object, a pendant, shaped like the eye, but cracked straight through its center. The codex, he said. It will show you where the next vault lies. Each one must be visited. Reclaimed. Not to reseal, but to unify. Unify what? Julian asked warily. The fragments, the warden said. Of her. Julian flinched. You mean the architect? Xander looked between them. Who is that? Isla's voice came out low and hollow. The one who made the vaults. The one who scattered herself to bind the darkness when her people turned against her. The 13th bell was her will, the warden confirmed. But her body, her soul, was broken into 13 pieces. Each vault holds one. If you gather them. He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Xander stepped forward. You want us to rebuild her? No, the warden replied. I want you to give her a choice. To return. Or to remain forgotten. The air shifted again. The shadows receded slightly. The silence broke as somewhere, faintly, a bird cried. The real world was bleeding back into focus. Choose quickly, the warden said. The choir knows you now. And they will come in voices. Not armies. Voices that change the world with song. He stepped back, and vanished. In his place, the pendant hovered for a moment in the air before gently falling. Isla caught it. It pulsed once in her hand. The crack along its center shimmered, and within its depths, she saw a mountain cloaked in storms, an underground labyrinth made of mirrors, and a city that burned with no smoke. The next vault. She turned to Julian. You're coming. He blinked. Why me? Because you know the codes. The languages. The history. And because I don't trust you, she said, eyes hard. That means I need to keep you close. Julian gave a short, bitter laugh. Fair enough. Xander adjusted his coat. Then we move. But we're going to need help. We're not exactly a trained task force. There are others, Julian said. Former initiates. Survivors from other breaches. I'll make contact. I'll talk to the faculty, Xander added. The real ones. The ones who have eyes but aren't blind. Some of them knew something was wrong. They just didn't know what. Isla looked down at the codex again. We leave tomorrow. Before the veil thickens again. No one argued. That night, Isla returned to her dorm, but sleep didn't come. She sat by the window, watching the stars, wondering how many of them were gates, how many still watched her, how many would fall before she reached the next vault. The pendant glowed faintly beside her. When she finally closed her eyes, she dreamed of a voice singing in a language she didn't know but somehow loved. The song was filled with mourning and promise. The melody curled around her thoughts, and for a moment, she felt her body drifting not through space, but memory. In the dream, she saw a woman made of light, suspended in chains that held the edges of the sky apart. Her face was both familiar and strange. And she whispered one word. Soon. The mountain waited. They arrived just before dawn, the first tendrils of light curling like smoke over its snow-dusted peaks. It loomed above them in silent majesty, its summit obscured by a swirling crown of storm clouds that had not moved in centuries. According to the Codex, this was the site of the final vault, the heart, the last fragment of the architect's soul. The wind howled through the valleys like distant voices, rising and falling in harmonic waves that weren't quite natural. Each gust carried a chord. Each echo seemed to remember them. Isla stood at the edge of the ice-locked path, flanked by Xander and Julian. Behind them, a small, disparate group had gathered, survivors, initiates, scholars, descendants of the 13th Bell who had lived their whole lives in waiting, unaware of what exactly they waited for. Now they knew. Now they saw her, Isla, the Gateblood, the descendant of the first sealer, the girl who once pulled a drowning boy from the water, and they did not see a janitor's daughter. They saw the last key. The climb was punishing. The winds fought every step. Time itself warped higher up, the sun slowed, the air thickened, and shadows moved independently of their sources. But they pressed on, deeper into the fold of the storm, drawn not by duty, but by destiny. At the summit, half buried beneath layers of blackened ice, they found it, a perfect circle of obsidian, etched with 13 concentric rings. The final vault. It didn't open with a command or a mark. It opened because Isla was ready. She stepped into the circle, and the storm stopped. Not eased, ceased. Every flake of snow froze mid-air. Every breath hung suspended. Time itself bowed before the gate. The obsidian rings uncoiled slowly, like petals responding to sunlight, revealing a stairwell that led downward into impossibility. The group stayed behind. Only Isla, Xander, and Julian descended. They entered not just another chamber, but a memory, preserved in stone. A cathedral beneath the mountain. A hall with no end. Its ceiling arched like the night sky itself, constellations blinking in rhythm with Isla's heartbeat. At the center stood the architect. Not flesh. Not form. But a presence. Fractured. Incomplete. A ghost of herself suspended in threads of golden light. Her face a mosaic of Isla's own features across thousands of generations. Are you ready to choose? She asked, her voice echoing through every stone, every thought, every breath in their lungs. Isla stepped forward, heart steady. What happens if I say no? The architect's head tilted. Then the fragments remain. The choir rises. And the worlds burn one by one, as they have in other branches. And if I say yes? I return, the architect said. And in returning, I rewrite the locks. All of them. You become my vessel. You give up who you are, so that others may remain who they are. Julian stepped forward. She's a child. This isn't a choice, it's sacrifice. But the architect's gaze shifted to him. You know sacrifice, Julian Vale. You gave up your name to serve a silence. Now I ask her to give voice to the storm. Xander grabbed Isla's hand. There's got to be another way. Isla smiled at him, quiet, fierce, and full of peace. This is the way. He wanted to stop her. He wanted to fight it, change it, fix it, but in her eyes, he saw something he had never seen before. Not power, not sorrow, but completion. She stepped into the threads of golden light. The moment her body touched the center, the cathedral pulsed. The threads unraveled, weaving through her skin, her bones, her memories. Her past lives unfolded like pages in the wind. Every gateblood who came before her, every seal, every shadow, every scream, they rushed into her, not as pain but as purpose. She did not become the architect. She became the answer. The light exploded outward, carving sigils into the mountain's walls. The storm above shattered into pure daylight. Across the world, and across worlds, vaults trembled, shimmered, and then stilled. The choir, poised like an orchestra with blades for instruments, fell silent. Their first verse never came. Their song dissolved into static, eaten by harmony. The fragments of terror that had waited in the cracks of reality dissolved like salt in water. And the eye, once opened, now closed, not in suppression, but in understanding. In the space left behind, Isla floated, formless, radiant, untouched by time. She was the daughter of the janitor. The girl who dived into dark water. The one who stood against the first gate. The one who listened when no one else heard. And as the light faded, a voice rang clear across realms. The lock is no longer broken. The door is now a bridge. When Xander opened his eyes, he was alone in the chamber. No architect. No threads. No Isla. Only the pendant, now whole, resting on the floor. It pulsed once. He picked it up, eyes wet, heart hammering. Julian stood beside him, silent. Outside, the others waited, staring into the cloudless sky as sunlight poured down for the first time in weeks. The wind had changed. The shadows beneath the world had gone quiet. Something vast had ended. And something vaster had begun. Because now, there were bridges. Not gates. Not prisons. The darkness was no longer a monster locked away, but a night sky waiting to be understood. And Isla lived in those bridges. In every whisper of light that flickered between worlds. In every act of courage, of listening, of choosing purpose over fear. A story that had begun with a boy drowning and a girl leaping into the water had become something more. A legend. A hymn. A name spoken not with reverence, but with hope. Isla Ramirez. The last key. And the first flame.